As duly noticed, I call the meeting of the Charter Commission to order. I note at the outset that pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, on June 16, 2021, Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until March 31st, 2023 of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12, 2020 executive order. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, the November 10th meeting of the Charter Commission will be conducted via remote participation by the commission members. And so the meeting is duly called to order, and I want to thank our elected officials for joining us tonight. The first part of the meeting, we'll hear from the Westwood elected officials, and then the representatives of the Division of Local Services have kindly agreed to speak with us. Chris, when we get to that portion, I might just have you introduce the members, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. First, I welcome Select Person Rob Gotti. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Select Person.
Thank you very much.
How we've been doing this, Rob, is at the outset, we just invite the person to give us any thoughts, comments, and the general nature that they have about the charter, best practices, things, issues in the town of Westwood relative to governance. And then we will follow it up with some questions and some issues that we have been mulling over. So I invite you to tell us anything that's on your mind.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, let me start by thanking all of you for serving on this very, very important committee. Let me start by just reaffirming that I believe that we should remain an open town meeting form of government versus representative. I know sometimes there's some questions around that. I don't know what type of conversations you may have had regarding quorum requirements and any potential adjustments there. A couple of other topics. I think there are some key positions that we should be looking at moving to appointed versus elected. I think we're a little behind a trend in this regard, especially as it pertains to town treasurer and the town tax collector. Dottie, I don't know if you have had any conversations with respect to the town clerk position, but certainly given some of the things that have gone on nationally with respect to elections, I think that that is a really important position that needs to be secure. With respect to the select board, I believe there may be some discussion as to the size. I actually favor the current composition of 3. I wouldn't really be in favor of expanding to 5. I think we have very effective deliberations with 3. I think we have a wonderful history of outstanding candidates who have served in that capacity in the past. I think expanding to 5 wouldn't do much other than to extend the duration of meetings. FinCom. I think this is something that I would like to see addressed. Is that
excuse me, Rob, before you go to FinCom, you had mentioned quorum, and I don't know if you were going to come back to that or if you wanted to address that now. Did you have thoughts on the quorum?
Well, I think that we lowered it during COVID, and I don't think that we saw any issue with respect to that. Having a lower quorum didn't mean we were going to see, a significant minority making decisions on behalf of the town. So I don't know if there have been any other discussions with respect to that, how you guys have been debating that, if at all. So that would be, I think that our current is it 175?
Yes.
So I don't know if there is appetite for lowering that requirement. I think during COVID, did we lower it to 25? And we still well exceeded the 175. So I don't know.
75, Rob, but
Okay.
whatever the case.
45.
Yeah. What was it? Was it 25?
45.
45. Somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between.
So, does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure thing. With respect to
Speaking
FinCom.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, was there another question, Paul?
No. I just sort of said you were going to talk about FinCom. Yeah.
Yeah, I know currently they're not allowed to serve on other boards and committees. You know, these are people who give, tremendously of their time and talent and are fairly well informed as to what's going on in town. And I think they actually would add value if they were allowed to serve on other boards and committees in an ex officio fashion. I certainly don't have any issue with the current size of FinCom. I'd be open to considering a smaller with potential alternates if you looked at 9 or 11 or something like that. But I don't have a strong opinion that 15 is wrong for us by any stretch. I think that, last year, I think any member of FinCom that brings a citizens petition article should be required to recuse themselves from any deliberative action on said petition article. There were things that were put out as minority reports that seemed like it was from the FinCom itself, which I thought was a little disingenuous. And so I think we might want to take a look and close that loophole. One of the things, and I don't know if this has come up at all, I guess one of my bigger concerns is maintaining a quality candidate pool, a bullpen, if you will, and having a vetting process because it seems like there's a rush to fill vacancies after town meeting. And I think there's got to be some mechanism for us to continually identify and vet prospective residents to serve. I don't know if there's, a committee that works to vet people, maybe a quarterly basis, if there was something where people could be, demonstrate some interest and go before them. I just think it's an awful lot to put on the moderator in a short window between the end of town meeting and when those positions need to be filled. I think in mid-January, mid-June, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then sort of the last thing I had on my list, and this isn't one that I've heard a lot of discussion about, but it's certainly one that is, I think, important to the ongoing and future operation of the town. CTAB, right? There's the requirement for an IT advisory board. I believe it's a 9-member board. Does this thing need revisiting? I don't even know who the current members are. I can tell you that what's on the website is terribly out of date. I don't know when they last met. So that's one, given the importance of IT infrastructure for current and future delivery of services for the town, for the ability for to potentially help with recruiting and have people be able to have remote work opportunities. I think there's a lot that needs to be considered in the IT infrastructure realm, and this is one that I think has withered. So those are the things that I have on my list. I don't know what else has come up in some of your other discussions, or if you have any questions for me.
Okay. I'll open it up to the commission members for questions, follow up.
Yeah. Rob, have you ever thought about, or what are your thoughts on no quorum requirement for town meeting?
I guess, is that something that is there precedent for it? I don't have an issue.
Yeah, there
Really?
is. That's in some communities, they're just silent on it. There are two things that we've heard is, well, three, I'll say. The size, if we have a quorum, what it should be, or eliminating a quorum. And the third is, if we have a quorum of a set number, should we establish that as the requirement to start the meeting, but not a requirement to continue to do the business?
Right. I
So
think
those are the
that
three
becomes
lanes that we're hearing about.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that I like either the lowering or the elimination of the quorum is for just what you're talking about. When we end up having to continue to a second night, or if, some of the articles get the most sort of energized articles, draw a crowd and then people leave and all of a sudden we fall below a quorum threshold and then it's difficult to complete the business of the town. Those are things that I do worry about. Yes.
Okay.
So I would be open to what this group has to say with respect to whether that is no quorum or a reduced number.
Okay.
Yeah, we've mostly been listening. Hey, Rob, we've mostly been listening and trying to learn the lay of the land on that. But yes, it does sound and seem like there has been the shift towards charters remaining silent on the level of the quorum, which, yeah, that's so we're I think it's fair to say we're sort of wrestling with that concept.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
John?
And Rob, apologies if you covered this, but thoughts on the potential role of a committee in assisting the moderator in identifying candidates for various positions.
Yeah, so I don't know if that would be, so how that would necessarily functionally operate in terms of how they would be appointed, right? Because the select board appoints all other committee members for other committees in town. I don't know if that then sets up some conflict of any sort, but the idea that we have a process for both maintaining an active pool of people who are interested in serving and then vetting, qualifications for such, I think would be a really helpful thing to the moderator, because I feel like there's a 5 or less week window from town meeting conclusion to when the 15 slots need to be filled. And I just don't know that there's enough of a continuous refresh of and recruiting of people who may well be great contributors to that.
Thank you.
Rob, the other thing that we've been looking at is obviously, the universal consensus of people is that they like and believe in the open town meeting. Is there I know you've gone to a lot of town meetings and now and as a planning board member and as a select person, is there anything about the structure of the open town meeting that you would want us to think about to make it a better legislative assembly or body?
That's an interesting question. I think, some of the things that have happened over the past couple of years due to COVID have actually significantly helped the flow of the meeting. I certainly think that the budget presentation by the finance director having been pre-recorded is helpful because it flows fairly seamlessly. I think utilization of those types of large screens and some of the electronic voting that Dottie has been able to implement, I think those are wonderful things that make for town meeting a much more efficient town meeting than sort of the standing vote and things like that. So I don't know. I guess I would be, what other types of things, if any, have come up that you have considered in that regard?
Well, there has been some discussion about, can we have a better process than indefinite postponement, which seems to either confuse people or become a difficult thing to, and another way to enable us to serve the purposes of indefinite postponement with a different title, mechanism.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
what it's come up.
Yeah, and
And
in that
so-
regard, it was indefinite postponement for us to undo indefinite postponement requires a 2/3 hurdle. And we've been told by our legal counsel advisor that in some communities, it's a simple majority. So we create a higher mountain to climb just to get to the substance of the article that was recommended for indefinite postponement.
And so refresh for me, this is something that if the FinCom has recommended to town meeting indefinite postponement, and there is someone who wants to have that discussion, they need to first.
Defeat indefinite postponement. Indefinite
Mhm.
postponement means that the article is basically removed from the, off the warrant without debate, discussion.
Right, and
There's
procedurally,
debate and discussion about indefinite postponement, but once indefinite postponement is passed, we move on.
right,
And this seems to have been, people who are confused by that concept. And so we've talked about, trying to do the same thing, which is if we have a warrant article that we can't act on that night because some contingency that needs to happen hasn't happened, or it's not ready, or whatever, to dispose of an article on the warrant. You can't just sort of leave an article on a warrant and say, all right, we're going into the next one. You have
right.
to act on each warrant article of some affirmative.
And would the alternative to that being a true up or down recommendation?
That's
Vote yes.
Or different labels, less confusing, but none of this is really in the charter.
right.
Right.
It's something that will, because one of the things we have is, to look at best practices and make some recommendations. And this commission will be followed by a bylaw review committee, and that we may want to, make some recommendations to the bylaw review committee as well.
So I with respect to, up or down on many of them, I don't have an issue per se with that. However, you did highlight a situation where if something is premature and requires some precedent to take place, then it would be a very natural recommendation from FinCom to recommend indefinite postponement, and that seems to be the right recommendation. Because it doesn't, so if something is voted down, does it have to change in order to come back at a future town meeting?
Well, on planning board articles, a certain time has to pass before you can bring the article back up. I don't.
If it's flat out defeated, or if it is
Flat out,
recommended-
yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the zoning articles fall into that category.
Yeah.
It could have a 2-year
I mean,
delay.
I know, so I know it's confusing, and I know that people have trouble with it, but it seems like it's procedurally the right thing. And so I don't know if there's a way to make language clearer or something like that, but procedurally, it seems like if recommending something for indefinite postponement allows it to be reconsidered without a dead period, if you will, then I think if you change things to be a straight up or down vote, you may be hamstringing the town from appropriate action, at a nearer future date. I guess that would be my thought on it as we sit here and discuss it tonight.
And then the other board, you mentioned the CTAP, that the other board that we've had some talks about is the personnel board, in terms of, given the sophistication, the complexity of HR recruiting, retaining, hirings, whether that, we should look at the personnel board and its effectiveness in the 21st century. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know that I've had enough conversation to give that one its due. Tell me a little bit more about some of the things that have come up with respect to that.
Chris, you want to say, the things that, the issues you have with hiring and all that?
So we have challenges as far as new positions, creating new positions in this market. The market is very hot and things move very quickly. We have to post a personnel board meeting. We have to have the personnel board review position descriptions, recommendations for classifications. And they are not slowing us down. The process is slowing us down. So I just want to be clear on that. And Molly, our assistant town administrative director of human resources, will be coming before the charter review committee to share her thoughts at their next meeting.
Are there alternative mechanisms or structures? Because sensitive to, especially in this environment of sort of refreshing the pool, right? There's the public administration field in general is a leaky bucket, and I can see that it's very competitive to go out and find qualified candidates. So I'm sensitive to the issue that you just raised. On the flip side of that, there probably is an appropriate role for classification of jobs and things like that. Is there an alternative model that other communities use?
And that's what Molly will be discussing with the Charter Review Committee. So there are some other models that are out there. There are some communities that have moved away from the role of the personnel board, or have maybe reduced the role in the advisory capacity of the personnel board. But again, I just want to emphasize, it's not the board members, it's just the process that we're
Sure.
in. Many
Yeah.
personnel boards were established when communities did not have HR departments. and didn't
As
have-
was ours.
So I think it's something to discuss, something to review, and something possibly, if it's going to be recommended from this committee to the select board, ultimately to town meeting for the town to consider.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be open to hearing more about that, and I think that, you know, that's something that this group should absolutely deliberate on.
So Rob, can you comment further on why you think a 3-member select board is the appropriate number of people from your perspective?
Sure. I think that one, it's a matter of candidates, right? It's sometimes challenging to get people who are willing to run. So there's that piece of it. The second is, I think it just increases the burden on the town administrator, right? So while it would have a benefit in that 2 members would be able to discuss business without violating open meeting law, it doesn't change the number of conversations that the town administrator would have to have and bringing people up to speed. In fact, I think it would, you know, substantially increase the burden. And I know Chris spends a lot of time on the phone with a lot of different folks, you know, on the various issues. And so I just don't see a significant benefit to the addition of 2 more voices when we have had a number of really strong, thoughtful people in the past and currently who are fairly effective at deliberating seriously on the issues. And I just don't see that a 4th and 5th member add to that. You know, I look at the length sometimes, and now granted, it is a different set of issues that they review, but the planning board meetings go on for upwards of 5 hours at times. Now I get that it is a different agenda that they've got to go through with a tremendous amount of detail. But when you have 5 people needing to weigh in on everything and comment on everything, all that does is serve to extend the meeting without necessarily a great deal of additional benefit. At least that's how I would see it as for a select board.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Select Person Gotti?
Yeah, if I could, Paul,
Peter.
thanks. Rob, we're interested in sort of gathering as much sort of commentary or opinion on the sort of the interplay between FinCom and the town departments over the course of a cycle, of an annual cycle, leading up to town meeting. And one thing that's come up is the view or perspective of some folks as to whether the FinCom role is sort of legislative, more legislative, or more advisory, and seemingly a tension between some wanting to be more involved and less as an advisor, where the departments come to and present.
I mean, I think the charter is fairly clear on that, right? They are an advisory role. If they want to be more involved legislatively, then by all means, pull papers on, you know, whatever the date is and run for office.
So I understand, yes, the charter is clear on that. It seemingly in practice, we're getting some feedback that it's not necessarily the case, and that's how it's playing out. So that's why I was curious your opinion on that. Whether there's
on that, Peter?
yeah,
I'm not sure.
whether well, it seems that depending upon the sort of the inclinations of the chair of FinCom, there's a sense of wanting more of a role of being involved during, say, the budget process, as it goes along, and being more involved is, I think, the best way to describe it. That at least as it's coming.
I think it's the role of the select board and the town administrator to set the budget, and it's the select board that presents the budget to town meeting. We, as we go through, are required to present that budget to FinCom. And, I don't think that having something in the charter that requires them to be involved earlier is necessarily a benefit. There is a significant process that is involved in building that budget. Several of those pieces are outside of our control from the state level. And so I those are all dependent pieces in being able to bring forward a complete budget for them on the FinCom to then review. I understand that there is a tension with respect to time and feeling like it's a rubber stamp. I've heard that phrase used. I don't believe that that is in any way the case. I think that the committees that the FinCom puts together to be able to discuss with Chris and other departments does a very good job in reviewing the various needs as they are laid out in the budget. And so, I think some of the frustration is also born of how much impact they really have on being able to change the numbers. When you look at our budget, it's something like 65% of it is personnel, and most of that is subject to collective bargaining. And so those pieces are already baked in. So what is it they're asking for, Peter? They want to be involved in collective bargaining? And so there are things like that, when you really get down to slicing and dicing how much they can affect change with respect to the budget. I think that's where some of that tension and frustration comes from. I don't quite understand how much earlier they feel like they should be involved,
Yeah.
and whether or
think,
not that's truly practical.
Right. Yeah, the rubber stamp reference, I think, sort of captures the essence of the issue, that the sense of not wanting to just to merely be that.
That's Peter.
feel-
We're losing you, Peter.
Sorry, can you hear me now? My
Yeah.
apologies.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, I was just saying that the rubber stamp reference, that sort of captures the essence of the concern that I've heard from some FinCom. That's not is rubber stamp, some more understanding of how things are put together as they go along. I don't want to overstate it, but
I think I understand the reference. I understand the sentiment. Practically speaking, until we have had the opportunity to go through all of the budgets that are being put together by the department heads and assembled by Chris and the finance director, there's not an opportunity for them to be involved earlier. I don't think it is their place per our charter for them to be involved earlier. Their job is, as defined in the charter, to advise town meeting with respect to the various articles and the budget. So that's my perspective on it. And
thank you.
Any further questions?
No.
Thank you so much, Rob, for joining us, and we welcome if anything else comes to mind or anything else you'd like to, talk to us about, please let us know. And something jars in your head after listening to all this tonight, please let us know.
thank you.
And we all wish you a speedy recovery.
Want to thank you very much. And
Doesn't
I
seem
want
like
to
Morris without you out there.
I want to just reiterate my earlier comment of thank you all for, I know this is deep and heady work, and it's important work for the future of the town for us to be able to get things done in an efficient and effective manner. So thank you all, and appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Rob.
At this point, I want to welcome Charles Donahue and Tony Mullins from the school committee. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us tonight. And again, as I said earlier, obviously we'd like any perspective from the school committee that you might have point of view, but also we invite you to talk about the town in general and things that you've seen and experienced or come to think about. I know both of you have given significant service to the town, and we appreciate that. So we invite you to let us know what you're thinking, and we'll might have some questions for you.
Thank you very much for having us. I'm currently the chairman of the school committee. Tony Mullen will be the next chairman of the school committee, and we appreciate all the work you've done, and thank you for that. I've had the opportunity to work with town departments a number of times. We've had great advice and support from our town councils many times. We appreciate everybody for that. One of our major projects has been building a new school for Hanlon Deerfield. I was at the committee in the State House in Boston where they announced that they were going to give Westwood $18 million, and everybody in the room was shocked. How can they give this rich town that kind of money? And part of it was we had kept alive schools that were built in the 40s and the 50s, kept them going and functioning, and they said, these people deserve something. So we were able to get it. We also had a committee that met, I think it was at least over 30 meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning. Thank Nancy Hyde for being on it, Chris Coleman for being on it. But we sought out advice from all over the town as we worked through the details of the new school building and got the state to approve every bit of that. And we're continuing with that process. So that was really a wonderful collaborative effort of so many town departments with all the different viewpoints and the experiences that people had to help us in doing that, which was one of our major projects. We also had town support with the COVID problem. We have a lot of teachers who are worried about their own health. We have a lot of school children, we found out, that didn't mind wearing masks and getting tested because they knew their classmates had parents at home who were vulnerable and could get picked up a disease from the kids who weren't going to get seriously sick, but their parents and their grandparents would. So we had the kids actually advising us on things that were really kind of controversial at the time. But with the health department in Westwood and other groups, we worked with a lot of other towns on what they were doing at a time when there was no guidance from the federal government or the state government. They said to school committees, you guys figure it out. But with a lot of help in our town and from neighboring towns, we're able to work our way through as best we could. And we're pleased with how that came out. We also realized that all the children's hospitals now are completely full. It's an 8-hour wait to get into an emergency room, and we're out of the woods. So we believe in resiliency to keep an eye on what we learned in case things get worse and come back to us. But right now we're trying to get everybody to get their booster shots and their actual vaccinations. The other thing we're dealing with is inflation. A lot of our estimates for our new building were made with the best information we had at the time. But we all heard about supply chain problems and the steel that was priced out and it's gone up. So we're trying to come in on the budget for our school project, watching it closely, but that's a challenge that anybody building. But when I asked what can we learn from other school districts at this time, I was told, well, we're one of the few that's actually gone out to try to do a project of this magnitude in this difficult time. So we're watching the budget on a regular basis. We're hoping we can get through with our projections so far, but that's also going to be a challenge as we proceed. The other thing is we're negotiating with our teachers. One of the strengths of the Westwood school system is the quality of our teachers and wanting to keep them. 17% of our kids have special education need. At our last meeting last night, we had a fellow come in who's with the special education advisory group of parents. He told us how he has 2 kids that have serious problems. And he thinks that he can't believe how wonderful Westwood has been to help his kids with their problems. But to keep these teachers, we've heard, is very hard. There's great demand, there's great challenges to keep quality teachers like that, to take special ed, to take autism kids and make them feel supported and continue on. So there's a great, as you have found in town government, in education, it's a real challenge to keep quality teachers. And we're in a negotiation with our teachers right now to hopefully keep them with high quality salaries, but also to keep them around, which is really the backbone of the success of our whole program. We have had recently, we've been advised nationally.
Can I ask, hold on, Charlie, I just, Mr. Chair, point
Yes.
of order.
Yeah.
I know this is important stuff, but I'm just wondering if we can
Yeah, I agree, and I just wanted
focus on the charter.
yes. So, Mr. Donahue, I know so much of what the school committee does and budget and all that is governed by statute now since education reform. But in your experience, is there anything that we need to look at in terms of the charter, in terms of the school committee? That's our first question. Then secondly, I know that you've been involved in many things in town and the history days and all sorts of things. So I'd be interested in your perspective as someone who's been part of and watched town government for a long time. Any thoughts you had in a broader sense?
Well, first of all, I don't want to interfere with Tony's opportunity to speak to you also, because he has a very valuable perspective. So far, I have been very pleased with our relationship with all of the town groups we've worked with. They've been very supportive of what we've been trying to do, have been very helpful in advising us. But I'd like Tony's perspective to be also introduced.
Sure. Hey, Tony, Mr. Mullen.
Hey, Paul, how
Thank
are
you for
you?
joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, you know?
So I would pose the same question to you in terms of
Yeah,
the
sure.
school,
So-
but also I know you've been involved in any broader perspective you might have, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so I have some, I think, similar to Rob, I have some macro perspectives maybe. And some of these, actually, I admit until Jessica sent me the chart earlier today, I never read the whole charter. So I have some macro perspectives, and then I have some more technical reading the charter. So I guess, and I have gotten some input from my colleagues in the school committee, so I'll share that as well. So I guess, I know there's the question about representative versus kind of, town meeting versus open. I know there's a lot of discussion. I think, I guess this perspective, at least what I believe is actually, I think there is something to a town of our size having an open town meeting. I think you saw that actually, even the fact that you got, from a school perspective, you got 1,200 people to come out for the vote for the new Hanlon Deerfield. I thought that actually was actually a positive. Actually, everyone could come out on kind of a chilly October night. And I thought that was actually kind of positive. And my other actually worry is more, having seen from a school perspective some of the national stuff going on, is I worry a town like Westwood, if you really mobilize, you might be able to get, 20 representatives on town meeting that actually could basically shut down the school. So I think the open town meetings work well for our schools. I think they're well for the plan. And I just worry about actually a town of our size, actually, well, you've seen the national environment where you can mobilize, a small group, especially in a town like Westwood. We might actually not be that what we want. So that, I guess I think it's worked well, at least my 7 years on the school committee. So FinCom, I know FinCom has been a big discussion. I think there is honestly a mixed perspective on the school committee. I think what we struggled with, I can just sell the symptoms. We've struggled with a lot of turnover on the FinCom. And so, when Maya, for example, was going year after year to talk about the project, there were people asking questions that were, okay, well, where have you been? It's fine, we can educate them. But so I think we struggled a little bit with the turnover. So I don't know if that's a size issue. I know they have, it's a pretty big FinCom, 15 people. I don't know if that's the right size. It's towards the larger side of other towns, but I think we've struggled a lot. I've struggled a little bit with just the turnover. There seems to be a core members. I get it. People have other things to do, but there's a core members that have been on for years and years, which is good. And you want some new people, but I think there's been such turnover, and I don't know what the cause of that is. It's been a struggle, I think, from the school's perspective. And I think, and also to the role, I think that came up with Rob. The charter is pretty clear. last year there were a couple of members, in February that wanted to like change the school budget. And we start, Emily and her team start on that project really in October. They get school committee input. When you get to February, it's hard. So if they want more input, it needs to be earlier because we're not changing the school budget. It's hard to change substantially when you get to like February. So I think it's some role clarification needs to happen. I do want to compliment though. I do think Jim, he's done a good job of bringing some more diversity and some, different perspectives and kind of, that as well. So I think we really appreciate that. I think having a mix of different perspectives has been great. What else did I have? So one thing on town meeting, I don't know if this has come up, I know some towns do it on Saturday. I think some thought to actually thinking about is Monday night at 7 or 7 o'clock, 7:30 the best. It's just, particularly for seniors, a lot of people, I think it's a really struggle. I don't know what the best answer is. I know Saturdays can be busy for families, but I do struggle with 7:30 when you start business and it's 9 o'clock before you sometimes get the votes. I don't know what the answer is. I don't have the right answer. But if we keep, I think thinking about actually when we do that, I know sometimes we're going to Saturdays or other days. I think that might help. I think it would actually, it would certainly get, I think, a broader perspective. So I've thought long about that. I know. So then I have some other, maybe just give some other, I'm just going to keep on rambling. Is that okay? Is this good? I just got a few more of the points.
Yes, that's exactly what we
Okay.
appreciate.
Okay. So I've been very happy with what I think they've done a great job in kind of bringing some, honestly, younger than me, which is great perspective. I'm kind of on the other, almost there with kids, but I think continuing to think about, I don't have an answer for this. This is not like continuing to, how do we think about bringing people, children into the town government more broadly? The school committee, by our nature, we tend to bring a lot of people like that in, but I think thinking about how do we bring people with children into other committees would be great. I think the capital, the new long range, I don't know if we want to codify that. I think that's a great addition. Thinking that I'm glad they're bringing back the long range planning. I don't know if we want to codify that as an official board. I don't really know what's an official board in the charter versus not, but I think that's a good thing. Capital is huge, as we know. From the school's perspective, it's, as you know, it's, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. But I think thinking about that is a good thing and codifying that. Then the other pieces, I guess the other pieces are more, when I looked at the charter, these are more kind of maybe technical pieces, but I do think they're important. As I read the charter, it was a little bit all over the place on how many members should be on a board. So I understand Rob's perspective about 3. We have 5. So the process of 3, I understand. The downside of that is Chris is spending a lot of time doing that. If Emily had a 3-person board, it actually would make her job a lot harder, I think, because she'd have to be doing everything independently. We can have subcommittees and 2 people talking to each other at the school committee. It's just more of a thought. Again, it's just there's pluses and minuses I get, but I think it's worked well at the school committee for 5. And so when I looked at the chart, it was like 5 for school committee, 6 for library, 3 for select board. I don't know. It just seemed like there should be some more consistency. I don't know if it's 3 or 5, but I don't know. It seemed a little inconsistent. And so thinking about that, it didn't seem, there wasn't any rhyme or reason, I guess. And I think it's worked well for the school committee. I think it puts a lot on Chris on it. Chris could speak for himself, but not having been able to have 2 members of the board talk to themselves is a challenge, but that's for that. The other technical piece.
Can I ask a question on that, Tony, if you
Yeah.
don't mind? So one of the sort of expressed concerns about a 5-person select board is that since two members can speak with each other, there would be, or the concern is that there might be sort of frequent conversations amongst 2 members on important issues that would otherwise, that will eventually come before the board in open meeting. But there would be so many discussions 2-on-2 that they would have resolved and squared away and made decisions effectively outside of the public view and not at the select board meeting. And so that is an argument to keep 3, because you can't have that happen. I'm not saying, and I'm not intimating at all that there's any inappropriate discussions at the school committee level, but do you find that there are sort of discussions is there policy discussion amongst members on occasion that you'd rather not have or prefer that not occur? Or is that not an issue in your experience?
I mean, I guess I haven't found a huge issue in my experience, but I mean, I guess most towns, it's not, 5 seems to be the norm in a lot of towns. So I guess, you know, I guess my question is, what's the consistency? So it's either 5 or 3, and why is the school committee different than the select board? I guess that's my point. I mean, I don't know, maybe I guess that's my broader point, is like, if that's the issue for this, if there's any issue for 5 versus 3 for the one board, it should be the same for the other, at least when you talk about school stuff. At least that's my view. But I haven't found an issue. I just think it would make, I think it would make Emily's job, you know, if you'd have to speak to her. You'll speak to her, right? You are speaking to her or no? I don't know. It'd make her a hard job, I think. That'd be my sense. So a few other technical, and then I'd let you ask me questions. The associate member language was very confusing. I read it twice and I didn't really understand completely what it was referring, but that's more technical. It seems like some planning board has associate members, and maybe that was just more of a question. And I didn't really understand why the zoning board needs 6 technical associates. Why not 2? Anyway, it's just more consistency on what associate members are doing and what that means. There was language. I'm not saying this compensation. I'm not saying we should compensate school committee members, or planning board members might not be able to legislatively. I don't know what the law is, but I know school committee members can be legislatively. I'm not saying they should or shouldn't be, but I think we should just make the language consistent. So if you wanted to in a future town meeting, it should be consistent. Again, I don't really care about $2,000. Trust me, after the last 2 years, that's not right. I'm on the school committee, but I think it should be again, consistency. Why is it like, why is there, I get like sewer commission or some things that are funded differently, but why is, you know, something that isn't legislatively, why is assessors yes, school committee no? Why is, you know, again, assuming it's not something legislatively, I would just make it consistent. It doesn't mean we have to say they're paying them or not. I'm just saying I would make it consistent. And then finally, before I stop my rambling, is personnel board. I agree. It's I'm in HR. I agree with the sentiment that it needs to at least be clarified what it is. In the private sector, it's much more, you know, we have compensation committees and public companies, which is much more very like CEO and very strategic. So I think just clarifying what that is, because, you know, there's a huge need in HR. That's actually the top, I think, need that actually the schools are looking for, is having additional HR support, because it's falling on the assistant superintendent. So whatever we can do to just clarify what it is, and maybe looking to other towns. So that's all I had.
Okay, we appreciate, no, that's a lot of issues, and that's why we're having these information sessions to sort of get thoughts and various aspects of the charter and best practices. Mr. Donahue, did you have anything? Did you wanted to add before we open up for questions? No. Any questions for Mr. Mullen or Mr. Donahue?
I just wanted to comment, Tony, I thought your comments on why you favor open town meeting to be very insightful. That, you know, the curious nature of if we had representative town meeting and people elected to that role, what the implications of that might be. So I want to say I appreciate that. And in terms of turnover on FinCom, I know that's not a charter issue. You know, they're 3-year terms and there's rolling, and we try to address things like that so there isn't a wholesale change in any given year. But you nonetheless, you point out something that's good food for thought as we consider what makes sense in the size of the Finance Commission. So again, I want to express appreciation for your thoughts on that. That's all, Mr. Chair.
John, did you have any?
Again, the same question I asked Rob. I like, at first, Tony, thank you very much for the service of the school committee, and Charlie as well. Very much appreciated. You know how hard the committee works. But on the question of the quorum for a town meeting, did you have any thoughts on that? Either as to where the number currently stands or how that could be assessed or reviewed?
I mean, personally, I'll leave it to, I mean, that one is, I'll leave it to above my pay grade and whatever, whatever you think makes sense. And people show up, they show up. You know, you're gonna get some years you get 150, you're gonna get, you know, school this year you get 1,000, you're gonna get, you know, isn't it gonna get 2,000, whatever the number is, not matter. I mean, I don't think, whatever, said it's something, maybe it's something minimal like 50, but you know, that's my view. But
Yeah, some towns apparently have done away with the quorum completely. And we've heard some feedback along the way here that, you know, our number, I think we've heard feedback that our number is high, and it can be a challenge sometimes to ensure that that quorum stays throughout the meeting. So I think there's a perspective here that the quorum could either be, the number could be reviewed, or the language around the quorum could be reviewed. So that at least if you have the number to start, you can continue business throughout.
yeah, I do want to reinforce. I mean, I think the more you can get quickly to vote on town meeting. Again, I'm not. Some of you have watched the school meeting. I'm not the most patient person. I think sometimes town meeting, if it starts and it starts 7:30, and then you get presentations and it's stuff. I don't know. That's not, again, something in the charter, but I think that's a different question. But like getting quickly, I know Pam did some great stuff during COVID on the pre-reads. The more quickly you can make town meeting efficient, at least I don't, that's my view. The better, but.
Thank you.
And I also appreciated your perspective from HR. I know that it's become much more of a challenge to manage personnel and recruit, you know, retention and recruiting and benefits and all that sort of stuff. And I think that I know, you know, we need to look at, we're $100-something million operation between schools and the town side. And I think we need to be really sure that the type of complicated policy and personnel and financial matters are dealt with by people who have the background and the training and the experience to do that sort of thing. So I appreciate your thoughts on that.
And I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, as we know, but I think there's a sense, I mean, at least in the schools, that this is not a short-term phenomenon, the staffing crisis. And, you know, I mean, teachers we can still get, but it's, you know, IAs, we still have openings. So I think there's a sense, who knows, in the even aside from the economy and all that this is a long-term challenge we'll face. So.
And Tony, I have a question for you as well. So your thought on changing town meeting to Saturdays, do you think that would promote more people with school-age children coming rather than at night?
It's a hard one. I mean, I think it would certainly, I'm guessing it would help on the seniors, like people, you know, that would certainly help that. I don't know what other towns have done. I mean, I think a Saturday in April, you know, isn't perfect, but you know, could we do it at 2 o'clock, you know, later, middle afternoon? I think if it wasn't morning, I think morning would probably be hard, but my sense is if you could do it, you know, my sense is a Saturday would be, my guess would be a little better if it was the right time, maybe, you know, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, where you could actually have, you know, it's past the morning. Certainly for seniors, and I think for some parents. I mean, we're not, you know, who knows? But these on weekends, I mean, I think that, you know, like we did in the school boat, we had a lot of, you know, we had the National Honor Society to get babysitters and stuff. So at night, you're always going to have, you know, at least one, I mean, you know, so weekend, at least most parents on average, again, you're going to have one parent not work, you know, both parents not working on average. So it might help at least getting one parent there.
And what is your feeling on an election on a Saturday as well?
Oh, that's really interesting. I don't know. That's that one. Yeah, it might work. I mean, I guess that one I have a different perspective on, as you know. I mean, that's not about that. It's just we've created so many other options for people to vote. Between we'll have early voting and mail-in voting. That, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that one I don't have it. That's more because we've done some stuff at the state level. So, but I think town meeting, because you have to be there. I guess that's the thing on town meeting. Unlike at least voting, you have. If we have 3 days of early voting and we have mail-in voting, we have other options, I guess.
Thank you. Charlie, Ms. Donahue, have anything you would like to add, or you thought you had?
Charlie, I think you're on mute.
I got to mute. Yep.
just thank you very much for your interest in what you're doing. And again, we've received tremendous support from the town on all the activities that we've had to deal with. And thank you, Tony, for his insight also.
And I appreciate you taking the time, Tony, to look through the charter and give us your thoughts, and you as well, Charlie. And as I said to Rob, if after this, anything else, or if you have any other thoughts or something, please reach out to us. We're trying to get as much of a broad perspective on things as we possibly can as we start to move towards, what recommendations or changes, if any, we would advise to recommend. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's unmute me.
Chris, Jess, or the people from Division of Local Services? I think I see a few names. Are they?
Yes, we have Casey and Marcia. Just for the committee did ask if, excuse me, if we could have representation from the Division of Local Services. This agency of the Commonwealth has presented to prior charter review committees regarding a variety of things. And what they have a presentation this evening for you to talk about the trend in the Commonwealth with the movement from elected treasurer and elected collector to appointed treasurer and appointed collector. So I don't know if Marcia or Casey will be leading off.
I'll start. Good evening. I'm Marcia Bohink, and the other one in the corner is Casey Bick. And as Chris just said, we are from the Division of Local Services. We're happy to join you guys tonight and be part of this discussion. If I could share my screen, I believe that you all received a copy of the presentation. Okay, but I will.
Yes, thank you.
Pop it up anyway, as soon as I figure out how to do it.
I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
There we go. I was looking for the little green button. All right. Over there. Am I sharing?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Never be short.
Okay. No, it's it. It's
all right. So just real quick, who we are, from the Division of Local Services, we are in the Financial Management Resource Bureau, which is our consulting arm. We have several bureaus. Bureau of Accounts handles the more of the accounting side and your tax rate, your free cash certification. Our local assessing deals with your assessor, getting your property values all set for your tax rate going on right now. We have a legal group, a data group, and our consulting group. We look at communities as far as structure. If, like you invited us here tonight to look at just the layout of the community, the structure, the reporting relationships. We look at charters, we look at bylaws, and we do a lot of best practice work, policies. Heard somebody talk about a capital improvement committee. We're very pro capital planning, and we created a lot of tools to support that. So anything around the financial management, our group gets involved. So tonight we're sticking to the point of moving from elected to appointed, just your key positions, when, why, how, and some statistics at the end, just to drive home the fact of the trends that are happening across the Commonwealth. When we first look at elected versus appointed, we like to start with what is the difference between the two and what is appropriate. And from the DLS perspective, we look at elected as the positions for policymakers because they're driving the community, they're from a higher level, your select board, your school committee, in some places, the planning committee. Appointed positions then are reserved for the operational side of it, the technical roles that need, why does it keep doing that? That needs some professional skills, that the training and compliance with the statutes. So laying just out those broad perspectives, why move from elected to appointed? Again, thinking of the specific qualifications that is needed. Expand the pool of qualified candidates. Anybody can run for an election, and anybody could win on any given day. Your treasurer and your collector, which is what we were talking about, they're very technical jobs, and getting more technical with each time that the Mass General Law is updated. You need somebody with experience in those roles that comes in, again, back to the technical aspect of it. When it's an appointed position, you have an interview process. Again, picking the best person and a background check. These positions need to be bonded. Your treasurer must be bonded within 10 days of appointment or an election. Well, somebody being elected that would not pass a background check cannot be bonded. Then that position is declared vacant. Then what happens? We like to talk about accountability. You have a Department of Municipal Finance. You changed your charter about 10 years ago to put that in. And your finance director supervises the accountant, the treasurer, the collector, and the assessor. Well, 3 of those positions are elected. So your finance director really is only supervising your accountant. Now with your structure, you have assistant treasurer and assistant collector. But your department heads, I don't know why this keeps doing this. Your department heads are not part of that structure. If on your appointed officials, your time, your attendance, the days you work, your review process, it's all on an equal footing. When you're an elected official, you don't have to show up, you don't have to perform. The next point, reflecting the position's value. And this is something that I'm going to touch on in a couple of places. Your treasurer and your collector, first of all, you guys have been extremely fortunate to have super qualified people in those roles, and that has managed the operations very well. You have a AAA bond rating, which if you did not have successful people in your financial roles, that would not happen. So this is in no way a reflection on what you have, but what you have is no guarantee of what you might get. Being a treasurer is super important, super technical. Ditto the collector. Right now, those elected positions are, well, I saw an old salary is very low, $4,000. And that does not reflect what is needed to be known to do those positions. So when you go to appointed, we're going to come back to that, but there needs to be a salary structure. And then it just goes back to the whole performance, building the culture of the financial team. Leading into the, yes. Oh,
Marcia,
go
if
ahead.
you don't mind me chiming in,
Please.
because just so everyone knows on this meeting, I've lived in a community that we've had an elected treasurer collector. I've also been an elected treasurer collector myself. And I think when we talk about accountability, I think it's important that people understand that we speak to the good and the bad, because your first instinct, like Marcia said, you've been very fortunate to have very qualified people and people dedicated to your roles. But the first instinct of, elected, of where it can go wrong is if you have persons in that role that are underperforming, that are not adhering to or giving as much importance or value to their position. and that accountability is lacking on what the town can do because they're limited in how they can supervise or even mandate what that person does as elected official. But on the other side, there's still accountability, when you have a qualified and capable elected treasurer collector. I remember there were times that I would be at the counter with a customer, with a resident, and they would have, they would be upset. Maybe they were late with their bill and they felt like they didn't deserve to pay the interest or the fines that everyone else were paying. And I would have to say, no, these are the rules, and these are the rules and they apply to you same as everyone else. And their response sometimes would be, well, wait till next election, I'll get you out of office. So I think the part of the accountability, it can go back and forth, is you want to have the person that is removed from politics so that when you do have capable and qualified individuals, that they're not forced into, difficult positions because of their, inherently political nature of their position and of their, how they got there. And, same, we can move on to, the financial team. I think it goes along to what Marcia was saying. And, in general, if everyone's on the same footing, that makes a much better basis for your team, for lines of communication, cooperation, because you're ensuring that, your structure is equal. It's fair, that you have, your assessor, your accountant, your treasurer, collector, that they're putting in the same amount of hours, that you don't have necessarily one elected official that maybe shows up 1 or 2 days a week versus someone that, puts in, 40 hours a week. So I think that baseline of having everyone feeling like they're on equal footing and, there to do their part kind of has a better sense of a blended team approach. And same thing in that, goes into, analyzing financial problems, paying attention, having the same long and short-term goals, and just having that overall collaboration. If everyone feels that they have an equal part and that they're not either making up for someone else or someone else is lacking or feel that they don't have to do as much, I think it goes a long way when you're talking about the intricacies of collaboration in your financial team.
And it goes along with the responsibilities and the title are matching and as part of that team. So specifically talking about the treasurer, Casey, since you've done these roles, I'm going to, you walk through them, please.
So the treasurer, I like to think of it as the keeper of the keys to the kingdom. The treasurer, they're in charge of so much, but essentially it boils down to, everything coming into the town is accounted for and everything going out is accounted for. You're talking about regular reconciliation, not just when you have to because you have to submit things at the end of the year or for the tax rate recap, but just having that regular, that position that's regulating on a daily, monthly, quarterly basis, the accounts that you're taking charge of, making sure that they're in charge of all the bank accounts, that, there's monitoring happening constantly of funds going in and out, the tax title, making sure that people are up to date on those, and, just general reconciliation, also working with the accounting side. And on the collector side, the collector is, to me, I always thought of my collector side as the traffic controller. You're just taking everything that's flowing in, making sure bills go out on time, collecting, what's due to the town, recording that, record keeping. That way the treasurer has all their information, so that your books can be up to date. And these are foundational building blocks. And it seems like it's very simplistic in the approach, but I think you all know, being in government, that it's very much underestimated how much work and how much time goes into having a well-run financial management, team, and especially when it comes to your cash and your receivables and, all of your outstandings. So it seems maybe something easier to us or simplified in this manner, but it's very important that you have people in those roles that can do all these tasks, and not only are willing and able to take the time it does to support these tasks, but also have the experience, have the qualifications, so that you're not forced into taking on a person that's having to learn on the fly. Because while you may be fortunate that you have people that can do that, it's always, it's always better if you can have someone coming into the role that you know, has the qualifications that these roles really require in order to do their tasks that are the building blocks of a good financial management in your community.
It's always, the question is always, well, when do we do it? When should we do it? When's a good time to do it? There's some natural breaks that make sense. When there's a retirement or somebody leaves the office, there's a vacancy. If there's been a string of poor performance, again, not, for some reason, my PowerPoint wants to be on its own schedule. When there's support from the current office holder, it's very important that if the people, the elected officials in that job say, yes, this is complicated, this is detailed, it should be appointed, this position has gotten to that point. When the community is aware of what's going on and there's consensus, and when you're talking about your finance committee, your finance commission, when they're supportive of it, making the recommendation to town meeting, the more people on board, the easier it is. When not to do it, there's always a flip side of everything. If it's going well and the people that are in those positions are planning on staying, I mean, you know your electorate, somebody else could come in and run. We have a slide later on. So in the past 10 plus years, the positions have all been uncontested. But again, that's no guarantee that that's not going to happen. And if there's a lack of public support, if it's going to go to town meeting or to the electorate and fail, then maybe the timing is not right.
Oh, do you mind going back to that, Marcia? I just want to speak on that a little bit.
Absolutely.
But on this of when to think twice, I think that you know, we really commend you for how you're approaching your charter change, because it seems like you're doing, you know, you're taking a very you know, long-term approach and getting multiple inputs from, you know, different stakeholders in your community. I've been in a community that honestly it's very contentious, and it's never, even though it's been on the ballot, it hasn't passed. And a lot of times it's boiled down to a sense of mistrust with who's proposing it. And there's been times where I think the public has felt that, you know, if they're not given enough information ahead of time, or not given a broad scope to basically have all the facts laid out for them and to come to that decision themselves, when people get a sense that they're being made, or if they feel for whatever reason that they're being siloed into one opinion, I think that's where we find communities can have a little pushback, because they have an inherent mistrust of it, because they may not understand all the details. You have someone coming to maybe town meeting once a year that doesn't know what each role does and why it's important and what it means to your community. So I think you guys are kind of going along the right approach of just getting that stakeholder input, getting kind of a long, you know, having a long-term discussion of saying, you know, this is what we're doing and this is what we're thinking about and this is why, and having those constant communication lines open. And I think that that's where things can fall apart when you have to think twice about things. If you're getting a sense that the community is not ready or they don't understand, that's where sometimes you can see, you know, ripples in the water.
Casey, can I ask you a question while you're on that? Community consensus. You know, our normal process for anything that needs a town meeting vote, and whatever track we're on, if we were to make this kind of change, we would go through the Finance and Warrant Commission. We'd have public hearings, first public meetings and then public hearings and town meeting. What else are you suggesting in terms of building community consensus in advance of a vote?
Yeah. Honestly, I think what you're doing right now, the fact that you've created a charter commission and you're having, you know, open televised meetings discussing this with multiple people, the fact that you're getting, you know, input from, you know, select board to school committee to finance committee, I think you're very much on the right track. And, you know, it is, you know, hard. I'm not sure what the sense of, you know, communication with your community is. I know, you know, maybe it's communication at a select board talking about, maybe it's, you know, having that advertisement in the newspaper, that making sure that that warrant article is, you know, very well published, or, you know, however you find that your community gets engaged the most, I would say. And it varies by community, but I do think that it's kind of like the breadcrumbs trail. The more you have it open and have that discussion out there, so people will naturally stumble onto it at some point. I think
Yeah.
that
Okay.
little goes a long way. So I do think that just having that open discussions with asking people to get involved and have their thoughts and opinions shared, I think that's the basis of it. That it sounds very simple, but a lot of communities miss that mark sometimes.
Great, thank you.
And it goes back to the current office holders too.
Yes.
If they're supportive, if they're talking about it, if they're at one of the public hearings and saying, yes, this is a good idea, that's very helpful.
For sure. Thank you.
So you make the decision, what needs to happen first. Developing a succession plan, establishing a target date, but you'll need a job description, office hours, salary, grade and classification. You're talking about that a little bit earlier too, and the benefits. That an appointed position is quite different from the elected. And as we said, the salary will change. It will be consistent with a full-time position as an elected or as an appointed official. Some of the communities recently that have made the change, a lot of them elected treasurer and collector, the two positions. And when they have made the change, they've also combined those positions to a treasurer collector, a single role. And if we look, actually, we'll go to why combine. My mind is out of order. The positions are very, very linked, and it's a lot of the same cash management, collect, count, record, deposit funds, very detailed record keeping. If it's handled all in one place, right now the collector is turning receipts, money, records over to the treasurer. That would be in the same office. It allows for I don't know why this keeps going forward, but if we look here, this is a suggested or a model organization chart where there's an assistant treasurer collector, and it allows for growth and some other opportunities within the office, because then you have coverage during work periods, vacations, and then it makes a more competitive position if you have a combined treasurer collector, and then you can have a combined assistant treasurer collector, and it makes the job more interesting. It's really hard to find municipal finance officials right now, so anything to make the job more attractive will work well for you. Growing trend in 2014, when we first started collecting these statistics, there were only 215 cities and towns with a combined 61%. As of this year, we're now at 281. So that's quite the increase in just 8 years. But again, looking at the organization chart, some communities have a combined treasurer collector, and then they keep the assistant treasurer and the assistant collector. I'm not sure where your payroll is, but it just as a visual. And again, it goes back to what your charter already describes as your finance director being responsible for all of the town's finances. To do this, updating your charter, reflect the new relationships. And I wasn't sure about this. I was looking in your charter that you have a tax collector, not a town collector, not having accepted Chapter 41, Section 38A. And I think that if you would want to combine them, you would want to just accept that statute too. The only difference is that a tax collector can only collect committed bills, your real estate, your personal property, any utility or a betterment, whereas a town collector can collect any type of receipt.
And I think on the subject of a combined treasurer collector, I think, different communities do, approach it differently. Some still have separated, some have combined, but I think for each community, it's about looking at your whole office and making sure that your office is set up from success, from the simplest transaction at the window to the monthly and yearly reconciliations and the debt management that's scheduled for the next 20 years. So sometimes, a lot of times we see the combined treasurer collector, and then they have different tiers. So some choose to have separate treasurer and separate collector, and then maybe a clerk. Some combine the assistant treasurer collector, have payroll, and then have someone that's administrative assistant. And it's really just I think the choice is first, before you make that choice, is understanding the range of transactions that happen in that office every day. So again, you're going to have someone coming to the window to pay a water bill, and that's a fairly, in the scale of simple transaction to handle. But then you're going into debt management and bonds, and monthly reconciliations and bond rating and planning out your debt for 10 years. So if you have all those activities in one office, you have to make sure that whatever structure you choose, you have a tiered responsibility level and the positions that reflect those increasing responsibilities as you go along.
Just another visual of elected versus appointed, the map of the Commonwealth. The light blue is all appointed. You have, which is 298 communities, where they're both elected is 44 plus Westwood, so that makes it 45. There's a couple with collector only and treasurer only. And I know at least one of those with the treasurer only is currently working on making that appointed also. So the collector and the treasurer in that community would both be appointed.
Can I ask
So
a question?
quite the trend.
Ask a question of the 44 towns that are still elected, or 45 with Westwood. Is there a demographic sort of similarity? Do they tend to be smaller towns with smaller budgets? I mean, I know there's some towns that are so small that they allow multiple office holding because they just don't have enough people to fill positions.
I just happen to have the spreadsheet open.
Because I'm just wondering, are they towns that's budget is like much smaller than Westwood's? And
no, they're kind of across the board.
okay.
Some are very small.
And I recognize some of those from my former practice, and I know some of these are very small towns.
Some are very small, but you do have
Rockland, which is a good sized town.
you have Rockland, you have I thought I saw Kingston, Milton, not small.
Oh, yeah.
So it is kind of across the board, but not many.
Okay, thank you.
And I think to that point, your question, I think a lot of that goes back to why has it been if you're in a community where it's been elected, why has it remained elected? Is it lack of political support for the change? Is it that the position doesn't operate fully to its, to its title, that maybe there's, for example, if you have an elected treasurer, that maybe you have a finance director that's really strong, that takes on all the responsibilities that would be associated with that. Sometimes it's the size of that particular community, or, the transaction level they have and what they feel they could handle. So I think to not answer your question, it really depends on the question of why that community has remained elected. And if you get to the core of that reasoning, I think you can kind of try to unravel and work backwards and say, if we want to go to appointed, you have to first understand why it's remained elected. And I think for Westwood, it seems like we had talked about before, you've had very fortunate, long-term qualified people, and you're coming up to a natural change point that wouldn't necessarily have been, 10 years ago. This conversation might not have fit in because you didn't have that naturally that natural occurring pressure to reevaluate yourself.
And I also think in part, even, for a town of moderate size, 17,000, I think the financial operations of even a town of the size of Westwood, which at one point in time would have been considered a sort of a small town, has become much more complicated. Budgets have become larger. Bonding has become more complicated. And so I think that that's part of it. I mean, I think it's a combination of growing pains, the town has grown, and also we've been very fortunate for 25, 30 years, somebody correct me, to have had really good people in those two positions. But
pulled some peer communities based on income per capita, population, single family tax bill, and you can see that you're an outlier for that. Also looked at the amount of your budget that is funded by your tax levy to get a sense of the volume of activity in the collector's office.
that's very helpful.
And then just for a little bit larger group, I did this, I pulled first on population, on budget size, and again with the tax levy. So again, even with the larger group, the first group is within the second group, but the outcome is still the same.
Can I ask Chris? I know that there's some towns that we always use for comparisons.
Yes.
I think I recognize a few of them on this list. I think Canton is one, right, that we often, and Sharon, when we try to compare ourselves to other towns for various reasons. Is that?
Yes. Yeah, some of our neighboring and abutting communities are some of our most frequently used comparables.
Yeah. John, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. It's very helpful. I'm very impressed with the amount of data and your ability to parse through it and summarize it for us. Just on the peer community slide and also this other slide of other communities, is there an ability or is there knowledge just off the top of your head as to when these communities switched over? Were these communities that have switched over, in the last 10, 15 years or so, or any sort of knowledge that you have on that question?
Hingham on this one switched maybe 5, 6 years ago. They're relatively recent. I think everybody else on this list is before that time.
Okay.
I can look to see if we have some dates in our data bank.
Yeah, either that, or I was thinking before the map that you showed of the Commonwealth. I guess that's a current map, right? And I
Yes,
don't know if there was a map like, that showed 20 years ago or something, so you could compare and contrast. Not to give more work, but just in terms of visuals, it'd be helpful.
Yes, I think that would be very interesting. Let me see. We weren't quite so data centric 20 years ago. If we can do it 10 years from now, we can do the 10-year span. But let me see what I can pull up with.
Yeah, even the first, it's a great question, but even the first year, maybe that you might have the corresponding records just to see the shift in that period of time.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
And then just the final slide, there's always the argument that the people should choose. And I like to look at the election statistics just to see how many people truly are choosing these. And then it goes back again to what kind of position is this? And should it be a people's choice? That the argument that the select board or the appointing authority is getting too much power and these roles should answer to the community. When, some years there was a good showing, but it's still not a whole lot of the populace So just a counter argument to that. And then our last slide, we couldn't say it better than your treasurer said it. I found this in your annual report from a couple years ago, and I think that says it all. So, Casey, anything else?
No, I just, I think Marcia and I have both appreciated when we're looking at your community, we're appreciating your approach to this question, because it's not always a difficult change. I mean, it's not always an easy change, and it can come with difficulties in, whether you're how it's perceived by your community, or how to go about it, or even just discussions of, if we're going to make a charter change, or just consider changes in our community, what do we consider, what's our scope, and, how far down the rabbit hole do we go? So I do think, you should, commend yourselves for, the work you're doing and the diligence you're doing, because, it's not always an easy road to go down. So to have the effort that you're putting into it, and the, the communication that you're clearly engaging with, I think that's a very, very good thing on your part, not only for all of you on this commission, but for your community.
Thank you. And we appreciate very much the support that you give, and the good advice, and the Division of Local Services. As someone who's been in town government and municipal law, I know the work you do is top notch, and we appreciate that. And we also thank you for the time that you took to put this presentation together, and for taking time out of your evening to come and join us.
Yeah, this information has been terrific. Really great.
Good.
Well,
Yeah,
we're
I
happy
appreciate
to
it.
do it.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is Peter. So I had been on the DLS gateway the last couple of weeks, and I couldn't find actually the same information. So when your presentation came in, yes, I was very happy to see, in particular, the information towards the end sliced that way. Do you mind if going forward, if I could reach, or any of us could reach back out to you, perhaps with some additional follow-up?
Absolutely.
And we'll do that through Chris. Would that be the best way?
Yes, he has our contact information, and that's what we're there for. So
Thank you.
Great.
Well, thank you.
Marcia and Casey, thank you
Other
very
questions?
much. This is very helpful and
Thank
greatly
you.
appreciated.
And-
welcome, and good luck with your committee and your changes, and
Yeah,
enjoy-
stay tuned.
we're around.
enjoy
Okay.
Enjoy
Good
your
night.
long week.
Thank
Enjoy
you
your
very
long
much.
weekend. Enjoy your long
Thank
weekend.
you. Thank you. Good
Have a
night.
good night.
Great.
Okay. Chris, thank you so much for facilitating that. I think that's given a lot of very easy to understand information that we could readily present to the people of the town if and when we decide to move forward with the recommendation.
Mr. Chair, I'd also like to thank Pat Ahern. Pat and I worked with DLS, their director, as well as with Marcia and Casey. So I would certainly like to give praise and appreciation to Pat's work as well.
We always appreciate the town council's assistance in this matter. The next item, I don't think we've received any additional responses. Is that correct? No.
That is correct.
Okay, and the next item I have on the agenda is invitation scheduled for upcoming meetings. And is there anybody else that we want to invite to come and speak with us? I know we have Molly coming, right? Is
Yes.
the next meeting is the 29th? Am I correct in that, or?
November 29th, 7 p.m. in the Gillette meeting room. We'll meet in person.
In person?
Why
Okay.
did I think we were meeting next week? Who mentioned? we were
I thought
meeting
we
next
were, I think I put that idea in your head, Nancy. I apologize. For some reason, I had something written down and I
I will
realized
clear that from my calendar.
I scratched it out. And
So
so
we're
I
meeting
also-
on the 29th. Okay.
Correct. At
And-
7 p.m. in person.
Yes. Does Chris Paff want an opportunity to come? I know there was a schedule mix up. Is there anybody else that we really want to make sure we hear from before we move into December? I ask my fellow members. Do we want to extend an invitation to Chris if he wants to join us? Chris Paff, if he wants to join us on 29th?
Oh, yeah.
What
I thought
about,
we did extend.
Yeah, but he had confusion with his schedule, so he didn't
Right.
make it. What about Phil Shapiro, the now appointed treasurer and former select board member and former board of assessor member and blah, 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 blah.
That's an excellent idea, as we heard from the current acting tax collector, correct? Lane?
Yeah, yeah,
think-
because I think he, that he might connect some things that haven't been connected,
Oh,
although we've had great input.
but I also think, based on the presentation, to get, if the current office holders feel strongly about it, that's very helpful to us
Right.
in making the decision and also in educating
Right.
them. So I think that's an excellent idea. Is anybody in agreement with that?
I agree.
All right, so we'll extend an invitation we'll have Molly, Chris Paff, and Phil Shapiro. Is there anybody else that anybody can think of?
Chairman,
Yes.
Fitzgerald, what about library trustees? Did we want to have anybody to chair?
I can ask Maureen. We're meeting on Monday. And I know Lizzie is out on maternity leave and she'll be back in January, but I can certainly ask Maureen.
I'm just thinking of representatives since we've met with a lot of the elected boards.
I'll take care of that on Monday. Anybody else? Okay.
I can speak for the Board of Assessors, but I also filled out the survey.
Right. Then the ordinarily we have some open discussion, but I know it's been a long evening and we've had a lot to think about. So do we want to just think about and then talk over at the next meeting?
I think that'd be good.
Peter and John, you and Don.
Yeah,
you
agreed.
work
I
that?
agree.
Yeah.
Great.
Then the next item I have on my agenda is public participation. Jess, is there anybody from the public who?
We have a few people, and if they would like to speak, they can raise their hand and I can bring them in. If
Sure.
not, they could just be listening. And that's okay too, so.
Is anybody who?
And
is-
nothing has been, or you can type in the Q&A and there's nothing in the Q&A either.
So we give opportunity to anybody who's participating in the town who wants an opportunity to speak. We always welcome hearing from the public. Just make yourself known to Jess.
I think you're good.
Okay, well, again, we thank you for taking the time to be an active citizen and participate even as just remotely in this way. The next item I have on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the October 27th, 2022. Has anybody had an opportunity to review the minutes? Are there any additions, amendments, deletions, revisions? In being the case, the chair will accept a motion to accept the minutes of the October 27th, 2022 meeting.
So moved.
Moved by member Locknane. Is there a second?
Second,
Second by member Powers. I will call the roll. Member Locknane,
Aye.
member Powers,
yes.
member Cahill,
Yes.
member Hyde, do you wish to vote or
I will
abstain?
abstain.
I'm not being present, I understand. And the chair also votes in the affirmative. With one abstention, the minutes are approved. And then is there any other business, new business that the members would like to discuss at this point? Hearing none. Again, I thank you all for taking the time. It's been a
Great
long-
meeting.
But I think we got a lot of very useful information and I appreciate everybody who spoke on Mr. Gotti, Mr. Donahue, Mr. Mullins and the DLS. And Chris, again, thank you for facilitating this as well as you, Jessica. You're making it very easy for us to do these meetings with the great support you're giving to us. And I appreciate that.
I know. Jess has been awesome.
Well, I get support from other people too. So thank you, Chris. And
Well,
I'm
just so
sorry,
you
if,
know-
I'm sorry if we get too many different emails about what time everything is and Zoom calls. And
We could-
Donnie's great.
It's all right. It worked out.
All good.
And we very much appreciate the support you're giving us and the attention and that you're giving to this endeavor. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Paul,
Yes, thank
Paul,
you.
could I just?
Yes,
Paul,
Peter.
sorry. Could I just since we're done with I think the business of
Mhm.
our commission, I just want to just thank Dottie for an awesome election process, and it was smooth again from everything I saw, and just knowing the climate, it's great. Personally, it's just great to know we have someone with integrity and experience running our election. So I know I felt great.
Thank you,
did.
Peter, I appreciate that.
Well
You
done, Dottie.
set a high standard, Dottie. You're
Great team.
matching yourself. And again, thank you to all the people who volunteer.
Yeah, we had
Including
great-
guy.
great
There was
support
some
staff.
man, there was some guy there, tall guy with
Oh, did you see him? I don't
First
know where he
man.
came from, but
Really good looking too.
he volunteered last minute.
Oh, he volunteered or was he volunteered?
He knew everybody's precinct. It was great.
And he was saying, I had to move these people fast.
I was glad when he said, if you know your
Yeah.
precinct, you can go right to the front of the line. And I was like,
But again, I echo that as well, Dottie, that we appreciate the time and effort.
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
Right, Member Hyde moves that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Member Locknane. I will call the roll. Member Locknane,
Aye.
Member Powers,
Yes.
Member Hyde,
Aye.
Member Cahill,
He's
he's
muted,
muted.
but he's
Yes.
yes,
There he
Member
is.
Cahill votes aye, and the chair votes in the affirmative. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
thank you.
And enjoy
you.
your
Thank
Veterans
you
Day
all.
and enjoy your Thanksgiving, and we'll see you on the
Same to
20th.
you.
You too.
Thank you.
Night.
Veterans Park at 11 o'clock for the observation.
Yes, thank you.